Welcome back, everybody. It's time to take another trip on the California Labor Law Odyssey as we examine the rampant labor law abuse that's happening here in Southern California and across the state. With the man who got so enraged after it happened to him and the employer in his company started an organization to fight it. Welcome back, Tom Manzo. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Paul. How are you?
Remind us again who you are and your organization and what led you to fight this fight.
Okay. Well, my name's Tom Manzo. I'm the founder of the California Business and Industrial Alliance. We're a nonprofit committed to reforming labor laws, and we're starting with the Private Attorney General Act, known as PAGA, also referred to as the Sue Your Boss Law.
And that's really what it is. It allows ordinary citizens who think they've been wronged to go to an attorney, and the attorney contacts the state and basically gets deputized to sue on not just your behalf or even the class of people that you might represent, but the state of California.
Yeah, late lunches, misclassified bonuses can cost you millions, and I know because the company I work for was a victim, along with about 8,000 other companies last year.
Wow. Well, one of them is here today to tell his story. Why don't you introduce your guest here?
Yep, it's Vincent Pasanini from SantaFe Importers, and he happens to be a member of our organization.
And mad as hell and not going to take it anymore here.
He's got some compelling stories to share today.
All right, so tell us about your business. It's a family-run business. This has been around for a while.
Yes, thanks for having me. Our business started in 1947. My grandfather started it. He was an immigrant from Sicily. And we operate 3 Italian delis, Long Beach, Seal Beach, and Irwindale. And we also have a manufacturing company. We make meatballs, pepperoni, sausage for restaurants all over the country. And we also make excellent tamales and chili.
Tamales, how did that one get in there?
Yeah, little company we bought a few years ago. This is the oldest brand in Southern California. It was started in 1894,
Wow.
and we're in every major supermarket here in Southern California.
So you guys should know the law by now. You've been around since the 1940s here. Come on, you're not some new business that didn't know what they were doing. What happened to you, and why didn't you know about this?
There's so much regulation, and it's so arbitrary in the way that it's enforced that it's really difficult to stay on top of it all.
Onerous. There's a fancy word, but it's onerous. It really is. You don't get a chance to fix it. You immediately get hit with a fine, and the fine or the threat of lawsuits are so overwhelming. You just pay to settle it. It's kind of a legal extortion.
Can you write that word down for me?
Onerous. There you go.
Yes, I might use it for Scrabble.
All right. All right, so tell us your story. We start every week by having people, it's like we're all saying we're in Alcoholics Anonymous here. Hi, I have a problem. My name is Vincent.
So our story starts about 3 years ago. We had an employee who we let go because we were downsizing. Actually, we let him go and a few others. And
see, there's your first problem. You had employees. Isn't that the answer? We got to get rid of all the employees here. Go ahead, and then you let them go. Oh my goodness! Yeah.
And a few days later, we were served with a lawsuit for workers' comp injury. Now he said that 6 months prior he had hurt his shoulder doing some work, and he never reported it, but he was reporting it now.
He didn't think of it until now. Yeah.
Exactly, and when we got the notice, in addition to his shoulder injury, he also was having sleep deprivation problems, psychological problems, sexual dysfunction. These attorneys, when they get these lawsuits,
they plant these ideas in their head. Yeah,
that can happen when your shoulder hurts.
Everything under the sun.
And let's stop for 1 second, because I was a small business owner myself. I owned a restaurant for a number of years and some partners, an Irish pub. And we lived in fear of workman's comp, and we went through some workman's comp fight. And there are a predatory group of attorneys, just like the ambulance chasers, just like the slip and fall attorneys. They should be disbarred. They should be run out of town on a rail, in my opinion. But that's all they do is find cases, and they literally fraudulently gin them up. They will send employees to special doctors who will say, you can't do this. I'll bet you can't do this. And they suddenly either plant these ideas in their head or just claim outrageously. And we've known this for years. The employee who something minor happens and suddenly he's got 1 million fake injuries, and they want to sue you in the assumption that it's cheaper to settle, right? So we've lived with that for years. Now what you're talking about is how it's grown beyond workman's comp claims, false claims, potentially false claims. I'm not saying
I
they're all
would
false.
say far beyond workman's comp.
Far beyond work.
Way
Yeah.
beyond.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So
In the Odyssey.
in the Odyssey, right? As the Odyssey, we've gone we've gone further into this black hole, further into the unknown universe here. All right. So it started with a workman's comp claim. Suddenly, 6 months later, this let go employee. I forgot to tell you, but I got all these problems
Right.
and all results from a workplace injury.
Right. So we have workers' comp insurance, of course, and the insurance companies settle those cases instead of taking them to court because it's far cheaper.
And I'm sorry, I got to stop you again. Are there, one of the things we'll talk about, is there insurance that can, will there be a whole new class of insurance that will protect you from PAGA or for other labor law
None
violations?
available. Nothing on wage and hour.
Okay, keep
Right.
going. All right, so fortunately, we have created workman's comp insurance, and that is what pays this claims, and it's up to them to decide, do we fight it or do we go for it? Much like, I'll give you another crazy example, sorry to veer off, but years and years ago, I had a minor fender bender, right? And it was my fault. I took my off thing. The guy started ahead of me, and I started with him, and I looked down at something, and he stopped, bang. I bumped it, and we're going about 10 or 20 miles an hour, not very fast, but I locked bumpers, caused a little damage. I foolishly came out and said, it's my fault, and I wasn't looking, and so thought that would be it. All of a sudden, 6 months later, he's hurt. He had to be taken to emergency. Blah, 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 all this stuff. So my investigator comes out from my insurance company and says, this guy's such a fraud. We're going to fight this. This is ridiculous. I can prove that you were only going 10 or 20 miles an hour. The damage couldn't have caused what he said it happened, blah, blah, blah. I thought, okay, good. They're going to fight this guy. They settled. And I found out they settled because I got dropped and by my insurance carrier. And I called him back and said, I thought you were going to fight it. And they said, well, it's too expensive.
Right. And for PAGA, I think the settlements probably are in the billions combined for small businesses.
Billions. Okay.
Right. So I'm sure insurance companies don't see a profit in that.
No, not in paying
out
that kind of
much
money. All right, that's a good point because the cost of being paid out is so great. All right, so I'm sorry to stop.
Back to the employee.
Back to the employee. Some laid off some employees. One of them comes back suddenly and says, "Wait a minute, I was hurt on the job. Forgot to tell you. Now I got all these problems."
Right. So the insurance company settled with him for $70,000. Wow. And that was workers' comp. And a year after we let him go, we received a second letter from a different attorney, and we were being sued under this PAGA law we've been talking about.
What's the period of time in which they have to file?
They
a
have
claim?
1 year.
1 year. Okay.
Right. And we received notice probably a day before that year was up. So and he had been referred to the PAGA attorney by his workers' comp attorney.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Because he saw money in it.
Right. I mean, it's really just predatory. There's a certain group of attorneys that this is how they make their money.
Yeah.
And I went to my attorney to say, hey, what is this? I didn't, it's always a learning experience, which is what I try to tell other business owners is you have to educate yourself.
You've been around since the 40s, and you didn't know such a thing existed, right?
Exactly.
So you went to your attorney, and what did she say?
She said, well, I'll be honest with you. We call this legal extortion. What's going to happen is
that blunt.
Right.
This is what it is.
Those were her words.
More and more this is happening. We see more and more of this. There's no other way to describe it. Legal extortion.
Right. So she said they have you for all these. They're going to ask for all your records. They're going to find you guilty of technicalities, whether you're doing right by your employees or not.
Because there's so many rules that it's almost impossible not to have some minor violations on some of these points.
Absolutely. So here's some of the things that we were guilty of. We have employees that start work at 5:30 in the morning.
Right.
And we let employees take their lunch breaks whenever they want.
Oh,
so
you evil employer, you.
And they choose to take their lunches around 11 o'clock, noon, 11:30, noon, and they all want to take their lunches together. And we're fine with that. Well, the law says you have to take your break before the end of the 5th hour. So an employee starting at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, they must take their break by 10.
Even
or
if they got to do
10:30
it
in
by
the morning.
themselves over there in the corner somewhere, they can't wait another 30 minutes or another hour to join their friends, buddies, relatives, compatriots.
Absolutely. And then the second thing that kind of got us was the employees came to us and said, rather than have two 10-minute breaks, what we'd really like is, can we have one 20-minute break earlier in the day? And then, when we take our lunch in the, noon or 12:30, we'll have our half hour then. So we get these two longer breaks. And we thought, yeah, sure. So
If that's what you want, we'll do it to
Right.
make you happy. Right?
Yeah, my mistake. And we even had everybody sign a waiver that said they wanted to do this, and that,
Oh,
and we
geez.
told them, if you ever don't want to do this, you
Let us
just have to
know.
let us know, and then we'll revoke the waiver.
And you thought you were covered then.
Yeah.
We're doing this because they requested it, and we're going to document it. So if there's any doubt down the road, this is something they wanted and they agreed to, and had the immediate right to pull out of if they didn't like it.
Right. And so this is how the penalties work. They go back 4 years, and they look at all these late lunches. So, we have 70 employees. So if everybody's taking a late lunch every day, add that up. Now, when they take a late lunch, the penalty is you have to pay them an extra hour's wage. And of course, we weren't doing that.
Say that again. So if I took a late lunch, and this can be what? How late is late? A minute? An hour?
A second.
Yeah.
A second.
Well, they say they give you some leeway, but if you have enough of them, they're going to get you. So 5 minutes, anything over 5 minutes is probably they're going to question.
All right. So now, if everybody, for every potential for every potential missed lunch that was more than 5 minutes late, I have to give them an hour of pay.
That's right.
And but this is just the employees that are present that time.
Right. So
Or is it all the employees that used to work there as well?
Well, it's everybody. Well, okay. So the past 4 years, whether the employees are still employed or not. So it's even terminated employees. If they were working with you in the last 4 years, they're included.
They get a little Christmas.
Vince, I'm just curious. How many years did you guys have that practice of taking lunch at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock?
No, that was their standard practice.
I mean, but how many years do you think they were doing
Give me a
that
number. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
No,
something.
probably
30 years?
20, 30 years.
Right?
20 or 30 years you guys have been doing this? You evil.
We're lucky they only got us for
And
4.
I think that's what a lot of people don't really understand. A lot of family type businesses, smaller, they work out deals, so they can accommodate their employees. And they've been doing it forever. So even if Vince 5 years ago said, hey, we need to change this, he's going to have upset employees. You're trying to make your employees happy so they stay working for you.
Right.
Right. So what happens is you've got a penalty for the late lunch. You've got a penalty for not paying the penalty. Then you've got a penalty because technically their wage statement is incorrect because you didn't pay them correctly.
That's the one that Tom keeps hitting.
So there's another penalty.
Let's go. So a penalty for taking late lunch. Okay, maybe I get that. But for every employee that ever worked for you for the past 4 years. Then there's a penalty because you didn't know you had a penalty and you didn't pay it.
That's right.
So there's immediately a second penalty for not paying the first penalty that you didn't even know. I didn't know I was in violation. I owed a penalty, and there's a penalty for that. And then this other one, you handed everybody a wage and pay stub. Talk about that. Seems to be one of the hot button issues that these predatory looks for. That seems to be an easy mark. If they can find any violation in that pay stub, you would think it would just be a minor correction. You correct it and pay back, and maybe you pay them a few pennies that were missing one way or another. Not so?
Right. So you have to have the name of the company, the address. You have to have their vacation pay accrued, their sick pay accrued. You have to have the hours worked. Overtime.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to really quickly.
Yeah.
I'm understanding now that you got to make sure as an employer that the bank is located in California, and if the bank is not located in California, you could have a really big problem.
And meaning what? So if it was like if it was somebody owned by an out-of-state firm and their
Correct.
bank was based in Ohio,
Correct.
and didn't have a branch out here or something.
Correct. That could be a penalty. So another thing to think about when it comes to paychecks.
Who do you turn to? I would think all the paycheck. Most people don't process their own paychecks. I think anymore. I don't know, or do they? I don't know. Do most of you guys do this internally, or do you get some outside service? Like,
We have outside services, but the problem is even they have no liability. So even
They have
if
zero liability.
they
have
have
a
no
mis-
liability, so they did it wrong, and you got to pay. Oh my God, this gets worse by the minute. All
That's
right.
So all these penalties add up.
Our
and-
payroll company lost the original paperwork, believe it or not.
They lost the original paperwork.
And I'm
Is
not
that
kidding
convenient?
about that.
Thanks
So,
for doing a bad job. All
appreciate
right.
your support.
Yeah.
So all these penalties add up, and when they add them up, they can add up into the millions of dollars. So here you are.
For how many employees?
Well, probably I think we had about 180 employees that were past.
You gave me a number earlier, Tom, just so we can calculate this in my head. When they come knocking on your door for a PAGA lawsuit for either a missed lunch or a pay stub violation, those seems to be the two hot ones. There's a lot of other ones they can go after, but those seem to be the two easy money.
Put $50,000 to $75,000 per employee in your budget.
For what you're going to have to pay.
What you could end up looking at.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so then you're under the gun. It's over a barrel, as they say. You either have to try and go to court, and if you lose, it could cost you a couple $1 million plus all the attorney fees. The attorney fees could easily get up there, and then you also have to pay the plaintiff's fees as attorney's fees as well. So
Jeez. That's really where it becomes the risk evaluation happens. I know this is not fair. I don't even think this is right. I'll bet I could win. But the cost to win is so high, you give up.
But you
absolutely.
can't,
That's where the outrage
you can't
comes
win,
from.
though, because if the lunch is taken past 5 hours, if the break was missed, there is
Voluntarily
no
or
winning.
not. Right.
There's no winning.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, just regardless of what your intent is.
And therefore, if the break was wrong, then the paycheck is automatically wrong, too.
Well,
Or
not so
perhaps-
much on the break, but if the break was missed, I think they can only compile. I think the lunch and the break was probably all into one.
I always try to put it in perspective. I always try to tell people, well, imagine you get pulled over, you're driving on the 405, and
Right.
you're going in excess of the speed limit, which nobody does that in Southern
No,
California.
not me. Well, you can't for most of the time, but
Right,
anyway.
right.
Maybe that's why everybody was honking at me on the way here.
Okay, yes.
I had a lot of people
So-
waving at me.
So I get pulled over
So you
for
get-
speeding.
Sure. So you get pulled over, and the police officer says, well, you're going in excess of 65. We're going to give you this ticket. But, hey, we're also going to look back the past 4 years.
We have cameras that we could go
That's
track
right.
you on, and yeah.
Right. In the past 4 years, we're going to look at every day you drove over the speed limit, and we're going to give you a penalty for each of those days. And each of those days you didn't pay that penalty, we're going to penalize
another
you
one.
another penalty
Right.
for not paying. And you can imagine how quickly those things add
That
up.
sums up PAGA. That's a great job. Great example.
So how did you feel when you found out they had you?
Oh, I was just so angry, but you feel completely helpless. There's nothing you can do.
And what did your attorney tell you to do?
They told me that what we're going to have to do is settle, and we went to mediation. And
What did the number start out at mediation?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
well, mediation.
What was the first number they flung at
Oh,
you?
it was well over $2 million. It's, I think $2.5 million.
No hesitation. They stand there and say, we're going to get you for $2 million.
Right. Well, they just go down the list of all the penalties and all the penalties of the penalties and the penalties of the penalties of the penalties.
And your attorney says what? Says, no, they got you. No, they got you. Nothing
Yeah.
we can do. Don't any attorneys rise up and say, no, this is wrong. We can fight this.
You can't. You can't fight it.
The cost. So we ended up settling for $300,000. And what was criminal to me about it, the settlement, was that most of the money didn't even go to the employees. I mean, each employee got a very small amount. $100,000 of that settlement, as part of the settlement agreement, $100,000, a third of it went to the plaintiff's attorneys.
This predatory group that whipped this up and found this. Somebody came in with a workman's comp claim, and they quickly whipped it up into something else.
Right.
And that's what they're getting about a third on everything.
And they want to go to settlement because they at this point, they'd put so little work into it.
Yeah.
All they did was request our records.
Yeah.
We had to do all the discovery.
That's because they're suing on behalf of the state, so they have extra power and extra
That's
extra
absolutely
subpoena
right.
power to pull all these
They
records.
want a
in.
list of your employees, names, numbers, social security,
And then you have to
number,
pay to comply with it. So there's a cost in compliance.
see
Oh,
when they
for
punched
the-
in, when they punched out.
The amount of work that went into compiling all those records and reports and getting it over to them, and then
Then you wonder, do they even look at it, right?
well, they looked at it enough to calculate the penalties.
Yeah.
I just think they look at the number of employees and that's it. you
But
know?
their cost in this thing was tiny compared. And then my attorney, cost me another $150,000. So the settlement,
For her, and all the while she's just saying, just settle it.
right?
I mean, you got to pay her $150,000. Just you could have fired her for that and done it on your own almost.
Oh,
Except
I feel
that
like
you
it.
can't. But yeah.
Right.
All right. So you're paying her. She's saying settle. You're paying your accountant and other people to comply with this discovery, to comply with the records, to come forth with the records that they're
So
requesting.
you got
under this
over
law.
$500,000 into this then.
Yeah, just about. And then here's what's crazy. The state is giving this power to this attorney to sue on their behalf.
Right.
And of course, you'd think, well, the state's got to want to get something out of this.
Yeah.
As part of the settlement agreement, the state got $10,000.
What?
So
Because I
that's-
thought they get a third of it or something.
It's negotiated.
Yeah.
What a lot of people don't realize, it goes into mediation. So what's negotiated is what the employees owed, what the penalties are, what the state gets. The only thing that's not negotiated is the
attorney's fee.
the attorney's fee.
Wow. So we got a predatory group of attorneys who see an opportunity and are seizing on it to literally shake you down, to extort money from business, and your own attorney says, you can't fight this.
But
Just
the stress
pay 'em.
and the aggravation is what a lot of people don't understand. I mean, in reality,
So talk about that.
I mean,
Give us some stress and examination.
yeah,
Or
Vince, go-
stress. and-
elaborate on that.
Oh, I mean, just sleepless nights. You're just angry, upset. And you just feel completely helpless. You're, being coerced into doing something that is just completely out of your power. People talk about, businesses and, not doing right by their employees, but, the relationship between a business person and their employees is strictly voluntary. You don't have to hire this person, and this person doesn't have to come work for you. But when you have the state, you have the power, the coercive power of the state to make you do things, taxes and possibility of jail. I mean, you're under the gun. You don't have a choice, and so you feel completely.
But it is all
helpless.
for the good of the employees. That's why we put these laws and protections into place to prevent abuse, to prevent problems, to make sure that they get what is fair and is coming to them. So what did they get?
Well, so let me speak to that because the settlement agreement doesn't ask you to fix anything. They don't tell you to change your practices. My attorney advised me, hey, so this doesn't happen again. You better
might
change
wanna-
your practices.
But that wasn't part of the settlement.
No,
It wasn't to
they-
correct the
they couldn't-
underlying problem.
They couldn't care less what
They don't
you did.
want you to correct it because they want to come back and sue you again.
That's absolutely right.
So you didn't have to fix anything. And how much did the aggrieved employees get out of this $300,000? You coughed up $300,000 plus another $100,000 to your attorney.
$150 to his attorney.
$150. How
Yeah.
much did the aggrieved employee get?
So the employees got, I think they probably got about $160,000 probably split up between, I want to say 180 of them.
About $1,000 a piece.
Yeah.
Maybe.
$1,000 a piece. It would have been cheaper if you'd paid them all $2,000 and they'd all just drop the lawsuit. Does anybody ever do that? Do you ever go to them and say, drop this whole thing?
Once you
and
get it going, it's almost impossible to stop.
Yeah, actually, you can do that, but your attorney advises, the attorneys advise against it because it's
yeah, because they don't all get paid.
well, and it's really risky because
It's
if it doesn't work,
very
then you're
risky.
going to court for sure.
Yeah. It's very risky because if you tried to settle, say you settled with all the employees that are working for you.
Yeah, you got
know?
100 in a room and you said,
Okay, all right, guys, we're all settled up. Well, what about the 80 that don't work for you anymore? And what if some of those guys say, oh, I don't think so. I'm not working right now. I'd like to get a little extra money. It's a huge risk to try and do that.
I think every single business is at risk for this type of lawsuit.
Every single business.
It's just a matter of time.
We're all sitting there with a target on our back,
That's right.
from
Now-
big to little.
Yeah, Vince, I think what's important is you had a culture prior to the lawsuit. How do you feel the culture of your company is now after the lawsuit?
Well, and that's a great question. And what's happened now is we've become like this Gestapo because we're enforcing our employees to do things a certain way. The regulations, if you hold to them strictly, really limit the employees' freedom and flexibility.
So what
in what
time
they
do
can
they
do.
start? What time does an employee
So
start?
an employee
now?
might start at 5:30.
And what time do they take their lunch?
Well, we have them take their lunch around 10 because we want some margin of safety.
10
because, you
a.m.
know, things happen. You
Right.
know, oh, I got caught up in doing this project or, you know, that sort of thing.
And how do you enforce this? You literally pull them off the line. I don't know. I can't picture what you guys do.
Yeah, well, we
making
literally have
sandwiches.
to walk around and tell everybody that
Meatballs.
they have to take their breaks.
And if they say, no, I'll wait, I'm okay.
Yeah, we say, nope, you have to go. You have to go. And then, you know, once in a while, we do ask an employee to take a late lunch, and it's usually the manager's prerogative. But when we do that, we pay them their extra hour
Pay them the extra hour. Yeah.
penalty. So we, you know, and, you know, nobody's unhappy about
And
that.
how
and
do you
that's the right
account
thing
for
to
all
do.
this? That's the other thing. So how do I know later on, how can I prove that even if I'm being a strict adherent to the law, how do I prove this?
You
down the
need
road?
sophisticated time clock systems, and that's another expense that people don't realize. You know, you have to really invest in something that keeps track of all of this, because when the attorneys do come, you need to be able to provide that data and say, hey, wait a minute, you know, this is
I
this
can
is
prove
an act-
otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, if I could give one piece of advice to business people out there, especially smaller businesses that don't use sophisticated time clocks.
That just have literally something you punch, you stick it in and
Right,
punches the time.
right.
on
So
there.
there's a practice called rounding that, you know, we used to do for years and years, and you just round to 15 minutes, and you know, usually sometimes it works out in the employee's favor, sometimes it works out in the employer's favor, but usually it evens out pretty much.
Does the time clock round it out, or do you
No,
round it?
the person rounds it out because the time clock, you know, only gives to the minute. It just makes it quicker to calculate.
Right. When you're adding up all the minutes, you just round
Right,
it.
but now with technology, it's much better to just make sure that you're paying employees to the